The cold wind cut through the air as the snowflakes fell gently around the darkened park. A small black girl, no older than 8, hurried across the path, her breath visible in the chill. Her name was Anna, and she was on a mission, one that would change everything for a man who had never even seen her before. The park was almost empty, save for a lone figure in the distance, sitting alone on a bench. He was Marcus Hart, a billionaire businessman with everything he could ever need except for a connection to the people around him. He sat with his head down, shoulders tense, his mind lost in the weight of his thoughts. Anna's eyes scanned the area, and when she saw him, she quickened her pace. As she approached, she slowed down, her heart beating faster. She knew this was the moment she had been waiting for. Without a second thought, she rushed up to him and called out softly, "Excuse me, sir, are you okay?" Marcus looked up, startled by the voice. He hadn't noticed her coming. His eyes widened, scanning her small frame, dressed in a tattered coat, her shoes mismatched, and her face weary from the cold. She was nothing like the people he was used to seeing, and yet there was something about her presence that caught his attention. He opened his mouth to respond but couldn't find the words. Anna looked at him for a moment, then asked, "Why are you sitting here all alone?" Marcus hesitated, glancing around the park, noticing the emptiness of it. I don't really know," he said quietly, his voice almost lost in the cold air. "I have everything, but somehow, I'm still alone." Anna didn't speak at first. She simply sat beside him on the bench, her little frame shifting with the effort to settle in the cold. For a moment, Marcus just stared ahead, lost in thought, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Then, out of nowhere, Anna spoke again. "You know, sir, my brother, he's not doing well. He's in the hospital. He's sick, and no one cares." Her voice cracked just slightly as she continued, "I thought maybe, just maybe, you might be able to help." Marcus turned to look at her, confused. "I'm sorry, what?" he asked, still unsure of the direction this conversation was headed. Anna took a deep breath, her small hand trembling as she held something out to him. It was a worn envelope, crumpled at the edges but still intact. She handed it to him without a word. Marcus took the envelope cautiously, his hands freezing in the cold. He opened it slowly, and inside was a small, faded photograph. His breath caught in his throat as he stared at the image of his son, a boy he hadn't seen in years. His heart pounded as the pieces of the puzzle slowly fell into place. The truth was right there in front of him, in the hands of this small girl. He felt his pulse quicken. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his voice shaking. Anna simply smiled, her eyes glistening with an unspoken understanding. "I knew you would come. You're not as alone as you think," she whispered. As the snow continued to fall, Marcus realized that this moment would change everything, that the truth he had been running from was finally here. And it was Anna, this tiny, unassuming girl, who had brought him back to the one thing he had been desperately seeking: his family. "I know this is difficult to understand, Mr. Hart," Anna said softly, her voice barely above a whisper as she stood by the bench, her gaze fixed on the photo she had handed him. Marcus sat frozen, the photograph trembling slightly in his hand. The boy in the photo, the one he hadn't seen in years, was his son, Ethan. His heart raced, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a tightness in his chest that wasn't from stress or business, but from something far more personal, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "How do you have this?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse, as he glanced down at Anna. Her eyes met his, filled with a quiet resolve. She didn't look like a child who should have been involved in anything so complicated. Yet here she was, standing in front of him with the kind of certainty that could shake the foundations of his carefully constructed world. "I found it. I found him," Anna replied. She paused, her lips trembling as she looked down at the photo again, almost as if she was trying to steady herself. "He's not doing well. He needs help. I thought maybe you could help him, sir." Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He hadn't seen Ethan since the accident, the one that tore their family apart. He hadn't even known where his son was. After the divorce, after everything fell apart, he had buried himself in work. Ethan had been just another casualty of his failure to balance family and ambition. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to block out the flood of memories that came rushing back. The arguments with his ex-wife, the cold, distant relationship with his son, and now, this. A small girl, a stranger, handing him the key to his past. You're telling me that Ethan is your brother? Marcus asked, still trying to make sense of the situation. Anna nodded slowly. Yes, he's my brother. And he needs you. I don't know how else to say it. Marcus stood up abruptly, the cold air outside biting into him as he looked down at Anna, who seemed so small in comparison to the weight of the moment. Where is he? Where's my son? The urgency in his voice startled even him. Anna hesitated, then slowly raised her hand to point toward a small building at the edge of the park, just beyond the streetlight. He's there. He's at the shelter. They said he doesn't have much time left. Marcus felt a surge of panic rise in his chest. Time? What did she mean by time? He couldn't breathe for a moment. I need to see him. Now, he said, his voice sharp with desperation. Anna nodded, turning on her heel and starting to walk toward the shelter. Marcus followed closely behind, every step feeling like it carried him further into unknown territory. The cold didn't seem to matter anymore. He barely noticed the passing cars, the muted lights, the people walking by. His focus was solely on Anna, and the image of his son, his flesh and blood lying somewhere, needing him, needing his help. As they reached the shelter, Anna stopped at the door and turned to face Marcus. He's in there, she said softly. Marcus didn't hesitate. He reached for the door and pushed it open. The smell of old wood and disinfectant hit him as he stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. The place was quiet, too quiet. His heart pounded in his chest as he scanned the room. There, in the corner, he saw him, Ethan, his son, lying on a cot, pale and weak, with an IV in his arm. The sight nearly brought Marcus to his knees. Ethan, he whispered, stepping forward. Anna stayed by the door, her hands wringing nervously as she watched him. Marcus bent down beside the cot, his eyes searching his son's face, the face of a boy he barely recognized. Ethan, Marcus said again, louder this time, his voice breaking. Ethan stirred slightly, his eyes flickering open, his vision blurry. Dad? Ethan whispered, his voice hoarse and weak. Marcus's chest tightened. He didn't know what to say. He had failed his son. He had failed him for years. But now, in this moment, all of that didn't matter. All that mattered was that Ethan was here, and he had to do whatever it took to help him. I'm here, son, Marcus said, his voice full of emotion. I'm here now. As he said those words, the weight of the years that had passed seemed to lift, if only slightly. He wasn't sure what the future held, but in that moment, he knew he had to make things right. For Ethan, for himself, for the family he had lost and the one he could still save. I need help, Marcus said, his voice tight as he gripped his son's hand, his eyes searching Ethan's for any sign of recognition. Ethan blinked, slowly, his face pale, his body frail. The room around them seemed to close in, but Marcus could only focus on his son, his heart pounding in his chest. Ethan's breathing was shallow, but the moment Marcus spoke, something in him stirred. Dad? Ethan's voice was barely a whisper, but it hit Marcus like a ton of bricks. He hadn't realized how much he had missed hearing that voice. The boy he had once taken for granted, the boy he had pushed away, was here. And he was fighting for his life. The pain in Marcus's chest seemed to expand with each second. Ethan, I'm here, Marcus said, his words catching in his throat. I'm so sorry. I should have been here sooner. Ethan's eyes fluttered, his vision still blurry, and he struggled to sit up slightly. It's not your fault, Dad, Ethan whispered, his words barely audible. I just didn't know if you still cared. The weight of those words hit Marcus harder than anything else. He had been so caught up in his own world that he had missed his son's pain, his loneliness, his need for him. He had failed to see that Ethan was slipping away, emotionally and physically. Of course I care, Marcus said quickly, his voice trembling. I've always cared, Ethan. He stopped, unsure of how to explain the years of distance, the years of silence between them. The truth was, he didn't know where to start. The guilt was overwhelming. Ethan tried to lift his hand weakly, reaching for Marcus's. You don't have to explain, Ethan whispered. "I know you've been busy. I just want to know that you're here now." Marcus's eyes filled with tears, and he squeezed Ethan's hand tightly. "I'm here now. I promise you, I won't leave again." The words felt foreign in his mouth, as if he had been saying them to himself for years but had never truly meant them. But now, looking at his son, he knew he meant them more than anything. "I'm not going anywhere, son," Marcus said, his voice filled with resolve. Ethan smiled weakly, his lips barely curling into a grin. "Good," he said, his voice fading slightly. Because I still need you." Marcus leaned down, brushing his hand across Ethan's forehead, his heart breaking for the boy who had suffered so much alone. "You've always had me, Ethan. I wasn't there when you needed me, but I'll make it right. I swear it." As Marcus sat there, holding his son's hand, a flood of emotions overwhelmed him. He had spent so many years chasing success, building an empire, only to find that the one thing that truly mattered, the one thing he had always taken for granted, was the family he had lost along the way. He had been blind to Ethan's pain, blind to the fact that his son had been struggling, that he had needed his father, not his wealth or status. The room seemed to grow quieter as time passed, and Marcus's mind raced with all the questions he had ignored for so long. Where had he gone wrong? What could he have done differently? But those questions didn't matter anymore. All that mattered now was that he was here with Ethan, that they had this moment. Marcus knew he couldn't change the past, but he could change the future. He could be the father Ethan had always deserved. He could make up for the time he had lost. "I'm sorry, Ethan," Marcus said again, his voice filled with emotion. "I'll never let you go again. We'll face this together." Ethan nodded slightly, his eyes closing for a moment as he drifted back into a light sleep. Marcus stayed by his side, never moving, watching over him. For the first time in years, Marcus felt a sense of peace that he hadn't realized he had been missing. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to fight for his son, ready to rebuild their relationship, ready to make sure that Ethan never had to feel alone again. As the minutes passed, Marcus sat in silence, his thoughts consumed with the realization that this was the moment that could change everything. He had been given a second chance, a chance to make things right, and he wasn't going to waste it. "I am not sure I understand what you are saying," Marcus said, his voice tight with frustration as he stood facing Anna. The tension in the air was thick, and despite the quiet hospital room, it felt as though the world outside was rushing by, leaving them in this suspended moment. Anna stood by the door, her small frame appearing far too insignificant to be carrying the weight of the truth she was about to reveal. Marcus had just learned something that shook him to his core. The boy lying in the bed, the son he had not seen in years, was not the only one whose life was tangled with his. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of the situation, but Anna's words were like a knot tightening in his chest. "You are my father," she had said earlier, but Marcus hadn't been ready to hear it. "What do you mean?" "I don't understand," he repeated, his voice laced with confusion. Anna stepped forward, her eyes filled with a quiet intensity, a calmness that Marcus couldn't understand. She had already known this truth, and yet she remained so composed, so certain of everything. "I said what I meant," Anna replied gently. "I'm your daughter. I've known for a while now, and it's time you knew the truth." Marcus stumbled back, his hand resting on the edge of the bed. His heart raced, and his breath became shallow. He had thought the last few years had been the hardest of his life, but nothing compared to the revelation that his entire life, the one he had spent building and keeping separate from everyone else, had been a lie. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "This can't be true. How can this be true?" Anna didn't flinch at his words. She just stood there, unwavering, waiting for him to process it. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to process this. I never knew." He trailed off, his emotions boiling over as he tried to reconcile the truth with his own failures. "You never knew because you never asked," Anna said, her voice soft but firm. "You were too busy with your own life, your own plans, and I was the one who had to survive." Her words hit him like a punch. Marcus took a step back, his mind reeling. He wanted to argue, to deny it, but the raw truth in Anna's words was undeniable. She was his daughter, and he had failed her. He had failed both her and Ethan in ways he couldn't even comprehend. The silence that followed felt unbearable. The guilt was overwhelming. Marcus turned away, his hands pressed against his temples, as if he could block out the reality of it all. "I've ruined everything, haven't I?" he asked softly, almost to himself. "You haven't ruined anything," Anna replied, her voice unwavering. "You've made mistakes, but you're here now, and that's all that matters. We can't go back and change the past, but we can start making things right." Marcus turned back to face her, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "But how? How do I fix this? How do I make up for all the time I've lost?" Anna stepped closer, her small hand reaching out to touch his arm. "It's not about fixing everything all at once," she said. "It's about being here. It's about showing up. You're already doing that, just by being here, by listening." Marcus swallowed hard, his throat tight. "But I've hurt you. I've hurt both of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't undo that." "No," Anna agreed. "You can't undo it. But you can try, and that's all we can ask for." The room fell silent again, but this time, it was a silence filled with understanding. Marcus's heart, which had been so tightly closed off for so long, began to crack open. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't even know where to start, but Anna was right. All he could do was try. And so, as he stood there, with the weight of his past mistakes heavy on his chest, Marcus made a promise to himself. He would try. He would try to be the father they needed. He would try to make up for all the years he had lost. And no matter how difficult the journey ahead might be, he would face it with them by his side. "I'm not sure what to do next," Marcus whispered to himself, his mind still reeling from the overwhelming revelations. He stood in the parking lot outside the shelter, his hand still clenched around his phone. The cold air seemed to numb him, but his heart felt like it was pounding in his chest. Anna's words echoed in his ears. "You've made mistakes, but you're here now, and that's all that matters." He wasn't sure he believed it. How could he? He had failed them both, his son and now, his daughter. How could he make up for the years he had lost? How could he ever be the father they deserved? He had no answers. Marcus sat down on the hood of his car, staring out at the street. It was a quiet evening, the only sounds coming from the distant hum of the city. But in his mind, everything was loud. His past mistakes, his missed opportunities, his failures as a father. They all weighed down on him. He had spent so many years building his empire, chasing after success, while his family fell apart. Now, his son was fighting for his life, and a daughter he didn't know existed was standing beside him, offering him a second chance. How could he possibly make that right? The sound of footsteps approaching interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see Anna walking toward him, her small figure cutting through the dark. Despite the weight of everything, she still looked calm, composed. She had been the one to bring him back from the edge of his self-doubt, the one who had given him a chance to rebuild. Marcus felt a pang of guilt in his chest as she stopped in front of him. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly, her voice steady. He nodded, but there was no real conviction in it. "I'm just trying to figure everything out." Anna smiled gently, a look of understanding in her eyes. "You don't have to figure everything out right now," she said softly. "You just have to keep moving forward." Marcus looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. This was his daughter, the girl who had come into his life like a storm, shaking him out of his complacency, showing him what he had lost. He had no idea what to say to her, no idea how to express the gratitude and the guilt and the confusion all swirling inside him, but he tried. "I'm so sorry, Anna," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry for not being there, for not seeing you, for everything." Anna reached out, placing her hand on his arm. "You're here now," she said, her voice steady. "That's all that matters." Marcus felt his chest tighten as the weight of her words sank in. He had a long road ahead of him, and there was no guarantee he could make things right. But Anna was right. The first step was showing up. The first step was being there. "I know I've got a lot to make up for," Marcus said, his voice shaking slightly. "But I'm going to try. I'm going to do whatever it takes to be the father you deserve." Anna nodded, her eyes soft. "That's all I want," she said quietly. "I just want you to be here." Marcus took a deep breath, his hands clenched tightly at his sides. He could feel the weight of his past pressing against him, but he also felt something else: hope. A small, fragile thing, but it was there. The journey ahead was going to be difficult. He knew that, but it was a journey he was ready to take, with Anna by his side, and with Ethan in the hospital, fighting for his life. Marcus wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't going to give up on them. Not now, not ever. He stood up, his legs a little shaky, but determined. "Thank you, Anna," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything." Anna smiled again, her eyes full of warmth. "You don't need to thank me," she said softly. "You're my dad. I just want you to be here. That's all." Marcus nodded, his throat tight. "I will be," he promised. "I will be here." The following morning, Marcus sat in the dim light of his office, the cold still lingering in the air as he stared at the papers in front of him. The weight of everything he had learned over the past 24 hours pressed down on him like a heavy cloud. He had a family he hadn't known about, a daughter he hadn't raised, and a son he had abandoned. His mind kept going back to those moments in the hospital when he had sat beside Ethan, seeing the pain in his eyes and knowing that he had caused it. He couldn't undo the years he had missed, but there had to be something he could do now. He couldn't let them down again. As his mind raced, his assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Hart?" she called softly, poking her head inside. "There's someone here to see you. They say it's urgent." Marcus looked up, his eyes tired but focused. "Who is it?" he asked, his voice rough from lack of sleep. "A doctor," she said, stepping aside to reveal a tall man in a white coat, his expression serious. "Dr. Walker." The man introduced himself, his voice low and calm. "I'm sorry to come unannounced, but this couldn't wait." Marcus stood, his pulse quickening. "What's going on?" "It's about your son, Ethan, Doctor," Walker said, his tone grave. "There's been a change in his condition. It's not good." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. "What do you mean?" he asked, already dreading the answer. "He's in critical condition," Dr. Walker continued. "His heart rate is unstable, and we've had difficulty stabilizing him. We're doing everything we can, but I need to be honest with you. We may be running out of time." The words hit Marcus like a slap to the face. He had been given a second chance to be there for his son, and now it was slipping away, just as quickly as it had come. "No," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. "This can't be happening. Doctor." Walker's eyes softened with sympathy. "I'm afraid it's true. I know this is difficult, but I need you to prepare yourself. You may need to make some decisions soon." Marcus stood frozen, his mind racing. He couldn't lose Ethan again, not like this. He had just started to rebuild the relationship he had abandoned, and now, it felt like everything was falling apart once more. "Please," Marcus choked out, his voice thick with emotion. "Please do whatever it takes. I don't care what it costs. Just save him." Dr. Walker nodded, his expression grim. "We will do everything we can, Mr. Hart. But I need you to understand that it's not just about money or resources, it's about time." Marcus felt a cold shiver run through him as the weight of the situation sank in. He didn't have time. He didn't have the luxury of getting it right the first time. He had to act now. Without another word, Marcus turned and walked out of his office, his footsteps quick and urgent. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like an eternity, his mind racing with thoughts of what could be done, what should be done. As he stepped out into the cool morning air, he pulled out his phone and dialed Anna's number. His hand trembled slightly as he waited for her to pick up. When she answered, he could hear the concern in her voice. "Dad?" "Anna, we need to get to the hospital now," Marcus said, his voice raw. "Ethan's condition is critical. He may not make it." There was a brief pause on the other end, and then Anna's voice came back, steady and strong. "We're on our way," she said. "We'll be there." Marcus felt a small wave of relief wash over him. Anna was his anchor now. She was the one who had shown him that it wasn't too late to try. He could still fight for Ethan, and he wouldn't do it alone. The drive to the hospital felt like the longest of his life. Every second seemed to stretch on, and Marcus could feel the panic rising in his chest. He had failed his son once, but he wouldn't do it again. He had to fix this. He had to be there for Ethan. When they arrived, Marcus barely took a moment to catch his breath before he rushed into the hospital, Anna right behind him. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air, and the sound of beeping monitors filled his ears. His heart pounded in his chest as he reached Ethan's room. Inside, Dr. Walker was already there, along with a team of nurses. Ethan lay on the bed, hooked up to machines, his body still and weak. Marcus's breath caught in his throat at the sight of his son, and for a moment, he could do nothing but stand there, paralyzed by the fear that he might be too late. Anna stepped forward, her small hand resting on Marcus's arm. "Dad," she said softly, "he's still here. He's still fighting." Marcus nodded, swallowing hard, and then walked to Ethan's side. "I'm here, son," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. I promise you." The words were a promise, a vow, and this time, Marcus knew he meant them. He had failed once before, but not again. He would fight for his son, no matter what. Ethan's eyes fluttered open, and when he saw Marcus standing there, his lips trembled, but he didn't speak. Marcus leaned down, brushing his son's hair back gently. "You're going to be okay," he whispered. "I won't let you go." The fight wasn't over yet, but Marcus was ready. This time, he wasn't going to back down. "I'm not sure what to do anymore," Marcus said, pacing back and forth in the waiting room of the hospital. His thoughts were racing, and the tension in the room felt suffocating. The doctors had come in and out, but nothing had changed. Ethan was still fighting for his life, and Marcus felt helpless. Every minute seemed like an hour, and every time the door opened, he braced himself for the worst. Anna sat in the corner, quietly watching her father. She could see the strain in his face, the exhaustion in his eyes. She could feel the weight of his guilt, the burden of years of neglect and missed opportunities. But she also knew that he was trying to be there for Ethan, trying to make up for lost time. It wasn't easy. "Dad, you're doing everything you can," Anna said softly, her voice breaking through his thoughts. Marcus stopped pacing and looked at her. He had been avoiding her gaze, not wanting to face the reality of what he had done, but now he couldn't avoid it anymore. "I don't know if it's enough," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I've made so many mistakes. I don't deserve to be here right now." Anna shook her head, her expression calm but firm. "You're here now, and that's what matters. You've already started to make things right." Marcus looked at her, his chest tight. "But what if it's too late?" "It's never too late," Anna replied, standing up and walking toward him. "You don't know how much he needs you, Dad. He needs to know that you care, that you're here for him, and you're doing that." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He wanted to believe her, but the fear and doubt clouded his mind. What if Ethan didn't make it? What if he was too late? The thoughts were overwhelming, but Anna's words, her calm presence, seemed to anchor him in the moment. He didn't have all the answers, but Anna was right. He was here now. And that had to count for something. Just then, the door to the waiting room opened, and a nurse walked in. She was holding a clipboard, and her expression was serious but not grim. "Mr. Hart?" she said, looking directly at Marcus. "There's been a change in Ethan's condition. We need you to come with me." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice rising with panic. "Is he okay?" The nurse nodded. "He's stable for now, but we need to move quickly. We found a potential match for a procedure that could improve his chances, but we need your consent." Marcus didn't even hesitate. "Do it, whatever it takes," he said, his voice resolute. The nurse nodded and turned to lead him down the hallway, with Anna following closely behind. Marcus's mind was a whirlwind as they walked. The doctors had been vague about the exact details of Ethan's condition, but Marcus didn't care about the specifics right now. All that mattered was that there was hope. There was a chance. They reached Ethan's room, and Marcus's heart stopped for a moment as he saw his son, still unconscious but with a faint pulse. The machines beeped rhythmically, and the beeping sound felt like a lifeline to Marcus. "He's hanging on," the nurse said, stepping aside to let Marcus approach the bed. "We've set up the procedure, and we'll begin immediately. We just need your approval." Marcus nodded without a second thought. "Do whatever it takes," he repeated, his voice firm now. The nurse smiled faintly. "We'll do everything we can." As the medical team moved around the room, preparing for the procedure, Marcus took a seat beside Ethan's bed, his hand gently resting on his son's. He could feel the warmth of Ethan's skin, the life still there, and for the first time in what felt like years, Marcus felt a spark of hope. "You're not alone, son," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He sat there for what felt like hours, his eyes never leaving Ethan's face. There was still so much to be done, so many things he couldn't undo, but in that moment, he realized something. He wasn't going to give up. He wasn't going to lose his son again. The procedure began, and Marcus watched, his mind racing with prayers and promises. He had failed Ethan before, but this time, he would fight. He would fight with everything he had to give. Anna stood by his side, her hand resting on his shoulder, a silent support. She didn't say anything, but her presence was enough. In that moment, Marcus knew that he wasn't alone in this fight. They would face whatever came next together, as a family. And no matter what the future held, Marcus had made a promise to himself and to his son. He wasn't going to back down. He wasn't going to give up on Ethan. Not now, not ever. The hours dragged on as Marcus sat in the sterile waiting room, his body stiff and restless from the unrelenting silence. The steady beeping of the machines in Ethan's room was a constant reminder of the fragile line his son was walking. Every time the door opened, his heart jumped, hoping for good news, only to be met with the same impassive faces of the medical staff. Anna had been by his side since the procedure started, never leaving, always present, and yet Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was being tested. He had been given this second chance, but was he strong enough to rise to the occasion? The weight of the years he had wasted, the moments he could never get back, pressed down on him. His failure as a father was like a constant, suffocating presence in his mind. He had spent so long building an empire, but now, with his son's life hanging in the balance, he understood something more important than wealth or power. He had failed to protect the one person who mattered most. A soft click of the door handle broke his thoughts, and Dr. Walker walked in, his expression calm but serious. Marcus stood immediately, his breath catching in his throat. "How is he?" Marcus asked, the words barely leaving his lips. "He's stable for now," Dr. Walker replied, his tone measured but not without a sense of relief. "The procedure was successful. We've managed to stabilize his condition, but we need to keep him under observation for the next 24 hours. It's a critical time." Marcus's knees felt weak, but he didn't sit. "What happens now?" he asked. Dr. Walker paused for a moment, his eyes flicking over to Anna before meeting Marcus's gaze. "Now we wait. The next 24 hours will determine how well he responds. It's a delicate balance, but we've done everything we can." A wave of emotion washed over Marcus, a mixture of relief and overwhelming guilt. He had been given a chance to make things right, to be there for his son when it counted the most, but was it enough? The silence in the room stretched, broken only by the soft hum of machines and the quiet shuffling of nurses outside. Anna, who had been standing by the wall, finally spoke, her voice calm and steady. "Dad, you're doing it. You're here. That's what matters. You're showing up for him." Marcus turned to face her, the weight of her words sinking in. For the first time in years, he wasn't running from his responsibilities. He was facing them head-on, even if it terrified him. "I don't know if it's enough," Marcus admitted, his voice raw with emotion. "I don't know if I can fix everything I've broken." Anna walked over to him, her small hand resting on his arm. "You can't fix everything," she said softly, "but you can be here, and that's enough. That's what Ethan needs." Marcus nodded, his throat tight with unshed tears. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that being present, being there for his son, would be enough. But the doubt still lingered, like shadows in his mind. He had hurt Ethan, and no matter how much he tried, he could never undo the pain he had caused. But maybe Anna was right. Maybe it wasn't about fixing the past. Maybe it was about being there now, in the present. He had lost so much time, but it wasn't too late to make a change. As the minutes stretched into hours, Marcus sat by Ethan's side, watching his son breathe, steady but fragile. The night was long, the hospital room cold, but Marcus stayed. He couldn't leave. He wouldn't leave. Every now and then, Ethan's hand would twitch, a small sign that he was still fighting, still hanging on. Marcus held his son's hand, his grip firm but gentle. "I'm here, Ethan," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm here, and I won't leave again. I'll be here for you, I promise." The words felt foreign, but they were true. He would be there for Ethan, no matter what. He would make up for the lost years, the time he could never get back. But it wasn't about what he had missed. It was about what he could do now. It was about showing Ethan and Anna that he could be the father they deserved. As the night wore on, Marcus stayed by Ethan's side, his mind racing with thoughts of the future. There were still many battles to fight, many obstacles to overcome, but in that moment, he realized something important. He wasn't alone anymore. And neither was Ethan. Together, they would face whatever came next. Marcus had a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. "I am not leaving this room tonight," Marcus whispered to himself as he stood by Ethan's bedside, his hand wrapped around his son's, the rhythmic beeping of the monitors filling the silence around them. The hospital lights were dimmed now, casting long shadows across the room, and the hallway outside had grown quieter as the night deepened. Anna had fallen asleep in the chair by the window, curled up beneath a thin hospital blanket, her breathing soft and steady. Her presence grounded him, reminding him of the promise he had made to himself and to his children. But as midnight approached, something inside Marcus shifted. He felt the weight of every unanswered question, every loose thread hanging over his family. How had Ethan ended up in this shelter? Who had been looking after him? Who had allowed this boy, his son, to drift so far from him? And why had no one told him about Anna? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that there had to be someone behind all of this, someone who had kept his children out of his life, someone who benefited from keeping him in the dark. The thought made his blood run cold. Memories of arguments with his ex-wife flooded his mind, her angry accusations, her threats to take Ethan away from him if he did not back down. He had assumed she was just angry, hurt, spiteful. But what if there had been more to it? What if she had kept secrets from him? What if someone had helped her? And what if those secrets had cost Ethan his safety, his health, his future? Marcus clenched his jaw, the anger simmering beneath the surface. He knew he could not fall apart now. He needed answers, and he needed them tonight. He gently released Ethan's hand and stepped out of the room, the cold hallway air hitting him sharply as he walked. He made his way to the small private lounge at the end of the corridor, where he pulled out his phone and began scrolling through old messages, old emails, anything that could give him a clue about what had happened. As he dug deeper, he found something that made his stomach twist. An email chain between his ex-wife and a former business associate of his, a man named Richard Hale. A man Marcus had once trusted, but who had turned on him during a deal that had gone wrong years earlier. In the emails, they discussed custody battles, finances, even plans for moving Ethan out of state. There were messages about keeping Marcus away, about making sure he did not interfere, about painting him as dangerous, absent, neglectful. Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. This was not just a mistake. This was not just a family falling apart. This was sabotage. Someone had wanted to cut him out of his son's life, and they had succeeded. He closed his eyes, fighting to steady his breathing. He could not confront Richard now, not with Ethan still fighting for his life. But he needed to be prepared. He needed to gather everything, every piece of evidence, every message, every detail. He needed to know who had done this, and why. And when the time came, he would confront them. He would make sure they were held accountable for everything they had taken from him, for everything they had taken from Ethan. "Dad?" The small, tired voice behind him made him turn. Anna stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes, her blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "Are you okay?" she asked, stepping into the room. Marcus took a slow breath and forced a reassuring smile. "I am okay," he said gently. "I just needed to make a few calls." Anna studied him for a moment, her eyes filled with quiet understanding far beyond her years. "You are scared," she said softly. "But it is okay to be scared. We just have to stay together." Marcus felt the tightness in his chest ease a little. He walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I am scared," he admitted, his voice thick. "But I am not going anywhere, and I am going to make sure no one ever hurts you or Ethan again." Anna nodded, leaning gently into his side. "We will face it together," she whispered. Marcus wrapped an arm around her and held her close. He knew the night was far from over. He knew the truth would be hard to face. But he also knew that this time, he would not run. This time, he would fight. For Ethan, for Anna, for the family he had nearly lost forever. "I will not let you down again," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible as he stood by Ethan's bedside. The steady beep of the machine seemed louder now, almost deafening. But the rhythmic sound of his son's breathing offered a strange comfort. It had been 2 days since the procedure, and Ethan's condition had stabilized. But Marcus could feel the weight of every second spent worrying, hoping, waiting. The doctors had told him to be patient, that it would take time. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he had been given one chance, one last chance to be the father he should have been years ago. As he sat there, his hand resting gently on Ethan's, Marcus reflected on everything he had learned over the past week. The truth had come crashing down, and with it, a flood of guilt and regret. He had spent so much time focusing on his business, on building an empire, that he had neglected the most important thing in his life, his family. And now, here he was, trying to pick up the pieces, trying to rebuild something that had been broken for far too long. Anna had been his anchor through it all, her quiet strength and unwavering support reminding him that it wasn't too late. She had shown him the way, and now he had to find the courage to follow it. "Dad?" Ethan's voice broke through his thoughts, and Marcus immediately looked down, his heart skipping a beat. Ethan's eyes were still heavy with sleep, but they were open now, and Marcus could see a flicker of recognition in them. "Hey, buddy," Marcus said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "How are you feeling?" Ethan swallowed, his throat dry, but he managed a small smile. "I'm okay," he whispered, his voice weak but steady. Marcus's heart swelled with relief. His son was awake, and that was all that mattered. "You're going to be just fine," Marcus said, his voice more confident now, a promise he was determined to keep. Ethan blinked slowly, his gaze shifting as if trying to focus on something. "Where's Anna?" he asked quietly. Marcus looked over at Anna, who was sitting across the room, her eyes fixed on the two of them. She had been a constant presence, never leaving his side, always offering her support, even when things seemed uncertain. "She's right there," Marcus said, his voice soft. "She's been here with me, the whole time." Ethan nodded, his lips curling into a faint smile. "I knew you'd come back for me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. Ethan had been through so much, and yet, here he was, offering a quiet reassurance, as if he knew deep down that his father would show up when it mattered most. It was the kind of trust Marcus didn't deserve, but it was the kind he was going to earn, no matter what it took. "I'm here, Ethan," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere, I promise." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, as if the weight of the words was too much to bear. When he opened them again, his expression had softened, and for the first time in a long while, Marcus saw the boy he had once known, the boy who had looked up to him, the boy who had trusted him. And in that moment, Marcus knew that he was going to fight for him, no matter the cost. The door to the room creaked open, and Dr. Walker stepped in, his expression as serious as ever. "Mr. Hart," he began. "We've had some good news. Ethan's vitals are stabilizing. It looks like the worst is behind us, but we'll need to continue monitoring him for a while. We're hopeful, though." Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding, a wave of relief washing over him. For the first time in days, he felt like he could breathe again. "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice hoarse. "Thank you so much for everything, Doctor." Walker nodded, a small smile appearing on his face. "He's a fighter," he said, "but it's not just the treatment that's getting him through this. It's you, Mr. Hart. You being here, being present, that's what's made the difference." Marcus looked down at Ethan, his hand still resting gently on his son's, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was doing something right. He wasn't sure what the future held, but in that moment, he knew one thing. He wasn't going to lose Ethan again. He had lost so much time already, but from here on out, he was going to make every second count. He was going to be the father Ethan needed him to be, and this time, he was going to get it right. "I don't know if I can do this," Marcus said, his voice tight with the weight of everything he had been through. The room was quiet, save for the steady hum of the machines keeping Ethan alive. The doctors had said that he was stable, but Marcus couldn't shake the fear that something could go wrong. His heart raced as he looked at his son, still unconscious, his small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Every moment felt like a fragile thread, holding everything together. "You're doing it, Dad," Anna said softly from the corner of the room, her voice steady, yet filled with a quiet understanding. She had been there for Marcus from the very beginning, holding his hand when he needed it most, offering her support when he didn't even know how to ask for it. "You're here now. That's all that matters." Marcus turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. "I should have been here sooner. I should have been there for him, for both of you." Anna shook her head. "You're here now. That's what counts. You're not the man you were before, and that's all that matters." Marcus swallowed hard, the lump in his throat threatening to choke him. He wasn't sure if he was ever going to be the father he should have been, the father Ethan needed him to be, but he knew he had to try. He wasn't going to let his son slip away again. The sound of the door opening broke through the silence, and Dr. Walker stepped in, his expression serious but not grim. "Mr. Hart," he said, his voice calm. "Ethan's vitals have improved, but we still need to monitor him closely. His condition is stable, but we need to be cautious." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He had been holding on to hope for so long, and now, it felt like it was finally starting to pay off. "What does that mean?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. "It means we're optimistic, Doctor," Walker replied. "But there's still a long road ahead. We need to keep him under close observation for the next few days. We're not out of the woods yet." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. The fear he had been trying to suppress rose up again, more intense than before. "He's not out of danger?" Marcus asked, barely able to find the words. "Not yet," Dr. Walker said, "but we're doing everything we can. Ethan is a fighter, and we're hopeful, but we need to be prepared for anything." Marcus's mind raced, his thoughts spinning in every direction. He had come so close to losing his son, and now, it felt like he was walking on a tightrope, unsure of what the future held. He wasn't ready to lose Ethan, not now, not after everything they had been through. Anna walked over to him, her hand resting gently on his arm. "We'll get through this, Dad," she said softly. "We have to believe that." Marcus turned to her, his eyes filled with emotion. "I'm trying, Anna. I really am." "I know you are," she said with a quiet smile. "And that's all I could ever ask for." As Dr. Walker left the room, Marcus felt the weight of the uncertainty hanging over him. It was a heavy burden to carry, but he knew he wasn't alone in it. He had Anna, and he had Ethan, and that was all that mattered. He couldn't change the past, but he could fight for their future, and that's what he was going to do. The rest of the night was a blur, long hours spent sitting beside Ethan's bed, his hand resting on his son's, watching him breathe, praying that he would wake up. Marcus didn't sleep. He couldn't. The fear and anxiety kept him awake, but he couldn't leave Ethan's side. He couldn't abandon him again. As the first light of morning broke through the blinds, Marcus felt a shift in the air. It was a small, quiet moment, but he could feel it deep in his chest. Something had changed. He wasn't sure if it was the hope that had started to creep into his heart, or the belief that Ethan would pull through. But for the first time in days, Marcus felt like he could breathe. Ethan was still here, and as long as he was still here, there was still a chance. The door to the room opened again, and Marcus stood up quickly, his heart in his throat. It was Anna, her tired eyes filled with a quiet strength. She walked over to him, her hand slipping into his, offering her support without saying a word. "He's going to make it, Dad," she said, her voice steady. Marcus looked down at her, his chest tight with emotion. He wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. "I hope so," he whispered. "I really do." Anna squeezed his hand, her smile small but genuine. "We've got this, Dad. We're not giving up on him." And in that moment, Marcus knew that as long as they fought together, they could make it through anything. He wasn't alone in this fight anymore, and he wasn't going to give up on Ethan. Not now. Not ever. "I never thought I'd be here," Marcus said softly, his voice trembling slightly as he stood in the hallway outside Ethan's room, his eyes scanning the familiar sterile environment of the hospital. It had been a week since Ethan's procedure, and though he had shown signs of improvement, the journey ahead was still uncertain. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic, but Marcus knew better than to get his hopes too high. Anna, standing by his side, gave him a knowing glance. She had been through so much in her young life, but her strength had never wavered, not for a single moment. "I know, Dad," she said, her voice steady and comforting. "But look at him. He's still fighting. You're still fighting. That's what matters." Marcus smiled, though it was a faint, weary smile. He had been fighting for so long, but this fight felt different. It felt more real, more immediate. His son's life hung in the balance, and everything he had been running from for years had caught up with him in this small hospital room. For years, he had distanced himself from his family, focusing on his work, his career, his wealth, and everything that kept him distracted from the pain of his past. But now, standing here with Anna and Ethan, he realized just how far he had fallen, how much he had missed, and he couldn't afford to lose any more time. "I'll keep fighting," Marcus said, the words coming more easily now, as if they had been waiting to be spoken for a long time. "For both of you, I won't let you down again." Anna smiled at her father, her eyes bright with quiet pride. "You're doing it, Dad. You're here. That's what matters." Marcus squeezed her hand gently before they both turned and walked back into Ethan's room. The soft beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the otherwise quiet room. Ethan was still unconscious, his breathing steady but slow. His pale face was framed by the thin hospital sheets, and Marcus couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt deep in his chest. This was his fault. He had failed his son, and now all he could do was sit and hope. But even as those dark thoughts lingered in the back of his mind, he knew one thing for certain: he would never give up on Ethan. The hours seemed to blur together as Marcus stayed by his son's side. Anna had quietly slipped away to grab some food, but Marcus couldn't bring himself to leave. The fear, the uncertainty, weighed too heavily on him. Every minute, every second spent by Ethan's side felt like a small victory, but the doubt never fully went away. Had he missed too much? Was it too late for them to rebuild what had been broken? The questions gnawed at him, but he pushed them aside. He wasn't going to think about the past anymore. He wasn't going to think about all the mistakes he had made. He was going to focus on the present, on the here and now. He was going to be the father Ethan needed. He had no other choice. "Dad?" Ethan's voice broke through Marcus's thoughts, and for a moment, he thought he had imagined it. But when he looked down, Ethan's eyes were open, though they were still cloudy, distant. "Ethan," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're awake." Ethan blinked slowly, his lips moving as if trying to form words. Marcus leaned closer, his heart racing in his chest. "Don't try to talk too much," Marcus said gently. "Just rest." Ethan's eyes flickered with recognition, and he managed a faint smile. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I didn't want to be a burden." Marcus's breath caught in his throat. "You're not a burden, Ethan," he said, his voice low but firm. "You're my son, and I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The words came out before Marcus could stop them, and as soon as he said them, a weight lifted off his chest. This was what he had been afraid of, the idea that he might lose Ethan, that his son might never know how much he truly cared. But in that moment, Ethan knew, and that was all that mattered. "I know, Dad," Ethan whispered, his voice growing weaker again. "I knew you'd come back." Marcus's heart swelled with a mixture of love and guilt. "I'm here, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I'm not leaving. I swear it." Ethan's eyes fluttered closed, but Marcus stayed by his side, his hand gently holding his son's. The uncertainty was still there, the fear still lingered, but Marcus knew that this was a fight worth having. He would fight for Ethan, for their family, and no matter what came next, he wouldn't back down. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but it would be worth it. He was ready to face it because he was no longer alone. He had Ethan, he had Anna, and together they would rebuild. Together, they would find a way forward. It had been weeks since Ethan had woken up, and though his recovery was slow, it was steady. Marcus could feel a sense of relief that he hadn't felt in years. They had faced the darkest days together, but now, there was light however faint it seemed. The mornings felt different now. When Marcus woke up, he didn't feel the same weight of the past pressing down on him. The guilt was still there, lurking at the edges of his mind, but it was no longer all-consuming. He had made mistakes, yes, but he was here now, and he wasn't leaving. The sun had just risen, casting a soft glow over the small hospital room where Ethan was resting. Anna had already left for a few hours to grab breakfast, but Marcus stayed behind, his eyes fixed on his son. Ethan was asleep, his face peaceful, but Marcus could see the small signs of improvement. The doctor had said that he was out of immediate danger, but there was still a long way to go. Marcus knew it wasn't just the physical healing that needed attention, it was the emotional healing, the broken bond, the years of distance. And yet, he couldn't help but feel proud of his son. Proud that he had fought through this, that he was still here, and that they had a chance to rebuild. "Dad?" Ethan's voice broke the silence, his words still soft but growing stronger every day. Marcus turned to see his son's eyes flutter open. A weak smile tugged at the corners of Ethan's lips, and for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt his heart swell with hope. "Hey, buddy," Marcus said, moving closer to the bed, his voice gentle. "How are you feeling?" Ethan took a slow breath, his eyes still heavy with sleep. But there was something different in his gaze now. Something that hadn't been there before. "I'm okay," Ethan replied softly, his voice hoarse. "Really, I'm okay." Marcus smiled, a smile that felt foreign, but right. He reached out and gently held Ethan's hand. "You've been through so much," Marcus said, his voice breaking with emotion. "I don't know how to make up for all the time I've lost, but I'm going to try." Ethan's eyes searched his father's face, his expression thoughtful. "You've already done it," Ethan said quietly. "You're here." Marcus felt his chest tighten. His son, despite everything, despite the years of absence and mistakes, was still offering him forgiveness, understanding. It was more than Marcus deserved, but in that moment, it felt like a second chance, not just for Ethan, but for himself too. "I'm not going anywhere again," Marcus promised, his voice firm. "I'm going to be here. For you, for Anna, for both of you." Ethan nodded, his hand squeezing Marcus's weakly, but it was enough to make Marcus feel like everything might be okay. It wasn't going to be easy, he knew that. The road ahead would be long, and the wounds from the past couldn't be healed overnight. But the first step had been taken, and that was enough. Anna entered the room just as Marcus was sitting back down. She had a small smile on her face, but there was a tiredness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She had been a rock for both of them, holding everything together, and Marcus knew that she needed time to heal too. "How's he doing?" Anna asked, her voice soft as she walked over to the bed. Marcus looked up at her and smiled. "He's doing great," he said, his voice steady now. "We're going to get through this, together." Anna sat down beside Ethan, her eyes flickering with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. She placed her hand on his, and the two of them shared a quiet moment, as if the world had slowed down for just a second. Marcus watched them, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a warmth in his chest, a feeling of belonging, of family. He wasn't alone anymore. They weren't alone. "We're going to be okay," Marcus said quietly, mostly to himself. But the truth was, he wasn't sure. No one could be sure of what the future held, especially after everything they had been through. But in that moment, he knew something that had eluded him for years. He knew that the most important thing wasn't wealth, power, or success. It was family. It was being there for the people who mattered, no matter the mistakes you'd made, no matter how much time you had lost. The future was uncertain, yes, but Marcus was ready to face it. Because this time, he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for Ethan, he was fighting for Anna. And no matter what happened, he wouldn't let them down again. Discover the emotional journey of a father fighting to redeem himself in this powerful black story. As Marcus faces the consequences of years of neglect and regret, he finds himself at a crossroads, hoping to rebuild his relationship with his son Ethan. This touching black story follows their struggle through hospital rooms and difficult choices, with the father making a promise to never leave again. As Ethan slowly recovers, Marcus learns that redemption is not just about correcting past mistakes, but about showing up and being present for the people who matter the most. The story also delves into the challenges of family dynamics and the complexities of healing, as Marcus's daughter Anna stands by his side, offering unwavering support. This Black story reminds us that, while we can't change the past, we can always choose to move forward, with heart-wrenching moments and moments of hope. This Black story showcases the power of family, love, and the relentless pursuit of forgiveness. Follow along as Marcus navigates the difficult road ahead, determined to never give up on his family. This Black story is a testament to the strength that comes when we choose to fight for the ones we love, no matter how long it takes.